When most people imagine wartime shelters, they think of tents, heavy canvas, oil-coated tarps, or metal sheets hammered together in the mud. But in World War II, when global shortages stripped armies of basic materials, soldiers in both Europe and the Pacific turned to something far simpler and far more unlikely. They built their shelters out of paper. Yes, paper. The same material we write on, transformed into something strong enough to survive battlefields, storms, and months in the field. World War II was the most resource-hungry conflict in human history. Every bolt of fabric, every gallon of oil, every scrap of rubber was diverted to aircraft, uniforms, and weapons. By 1942, many armies found themselves with no reliable way to make new tents, ponchos, or waterproof covers. On the front lines, mobility meant survival. Soldiers needed shelters that were light, fast to pack, and cheap enough to replace when destroyed. The old canvas tents were heavy, soaked up water, and rotted quickly. So engineers began asking, could something else? Something completely different? Keep a soldier dry? The answer, unexpectedly, was paper. Both Britain and Japan stumbled onto the idea around the same time. British field engineers, desperate for substitutes, began experimenting with heavy kraft and fiber papers. They brushed them with melted paraffin wax, linseed oil, and even shellac, substances that could seal the tiny pores in the fibers. Meanwhile, in Japan, where resource scarcity was even more extreme, craftsmen revived an ancient art, washi, the strong mulberry-based paper used for centuries in shoji doors and ceremonial screens. By coating washi with natural oils, resins, and lacquer, Japanese units created a flexible waterproof sheet they called oil paper cloth. It was light, foldable, and, to everyone's surprise, it worked. The technique soon spread through military networks. British engineers refined it in the field. American and Australian units tested their own versions. What began as desperation was quickly turning into one of the war's most ingenious materials. The secret behind the waterproof paper was remarkably simple. Take a sheet of heavy fiber paper, something thick like kraft or parchment. Soak it in melted wax or a mixture of linseed oil and resin. As the coating seeps in, it fills every microscopic pore. Once dried, water simply can't enter. Instead, it beads on the surface and rolls off. Layer 2 or 3 treated sheets together, and you get a surface that's not only waterproof, but also wind-resistant. Tests by U.S. engineers later proved that double-layered waxed paper could resist a continuous downpour for up to 72 hours. That's 3 days of heavy rain without soaking through. For soldiers used to sleeping in mud, that was a miracle. And it wasn't fragile. The wax made the fibers supple, allowing sheets to be folded and unfolded repeatedly without tearing. It was proof that ingenuity could overcome even the harshest shortages. In North Africa, British troops began producing their own waterproof paper in the desert. They melted paraffin candles over camp stoves, brushed the wax onto multiple sheets, and pressed them together with heated metal plates scavenged from vehicles. In colder European climates, linseed oil was added to keep the material flexible in freezing temperatures, preventing cracks. The finished sheets could then be sewn or glued using resin, creating custom-shaped tarps, ponchos, or tent walls. In the Pacific jungles, U.S. Marines and Japanese soldiers lined their foxholes with waxed paper to stop the endless seep of mud and rainwater. British paratroopers carried folded oil paper tarps in their rucksacks. They used them as ground covers during the day and makeshift rain shelters at night. In a pinch, several sheets could be stitched together to form a small bivouac, just enough to sleep 2 soldiers. And when the mission ended, the shelter could simply be burned to avoid leaving evidence. For troops constantly on the move, waterproof paper was a quiet lifesaver. It wasn't glamorous. No one wrote songs about it. But this simple invention solved 1,000 small problems. Maps printed on waterproof paper survived downpours that ruined ordinary ink. Ammunition wrapped in waxed fibers stayed dry. Food rations remained protected from mold and insects. It was lightweight, disposable, and above all, reliable. In war, where even the smallest edge could determine survival, that mattered. Historians today call this kind of creativity field innovation, the art of solving urgent problems with whatever materials are at hand. And in that sense, the humble waterproof paper was as valuable as any piece of advanced equipment. The best part? This wartime trick isn't lost to history. You can recreate it today, easily, and with materials you probably already have at home. Start with thick kraft paper, parchment, or cardboard for extra strength. Melt a small amount of paraffin wax, or beeswax if you prefer a natural version, in a tin can over gentle heat. Using a brush, coat one side of the paper, letting the wax soak in. Flip and repeat on the other side. For flexibility in cold weather, mix a few drops of linseed oil into the melted wax. It prevents cracking. When finished, sandwich the paper between 2 old towels and press it with a warm iron to evenly distribute the wax. As it cools, you'll see the surface develop a soft sheen. That's your waterproof barrier forming. The result? A sheet that resists water, folds cleanly, and can even be sewn or glued into shape. Layer 2 or 3 of these together with a thin smear of wax between them, and you'll have a material sturdy enough for tarps, ground covers, or improvised shelters, just like the soldiers of World War II. In an age dominated by synthetics, plastics, nylon, and PVC, it's easy to forget that paper can still outperform them in certain situations. Waxed paper is biodegradable, renewable, and non-toxic. It can be burned for heat in an emergency, and it doesn't release harmful fumes the way plastic does. For modern survivalists, preppers, or outdoor explorers, it's a lightweight, eco-friendly way to waterproof gear or make temporary protection without relying on manufactured materials. But more importantly, it's a reminder that resilience isn't about having the latest technology. It's about understanding materials, using what's available, and adapting under pressure. Exactly what those soldiers did 8 decades ago. After the war, the technique faded quietly into history. Industrial manufacturing returned. Plastics replaced wax and paper. The world moved on. Yet, traces of the old innovation still survive. In waxed canvas used by campers, in oiled cloths carried by bushcrafters, even in baking paper lining our kitchen trays. Every one of these owes something to the wartime invention born out of necessity. It stands as a case study in human creativity, how scarcity drives innovation, and how simplicity can sometimes beat sophistication. In a world increasingly focused on sustainability, this forgotten idea may yet find new life, in biodegradable packaging, in emergency shelters, or even in disaster relief materials for regions where traditional supplies are scarce. Sometimes the smartest solutions are the ones we already discovered and forgot. So the next time you watch rain slide off a waxed canvas jacket or a tarp stretched over a campsite, remember, that idea began in a world at war, where soldiers turned paper into armor against the elements. They didn't have much, just courage, creativity, and the will to survive. And from those simple ingredients, they crafted something extraordinary. Because innovation doesn't always come from laboratories or factories, sometimes it comes from a soldier's field kit and a sheet of waxed paper. If you enjoyed uncovering this lost piece of wartime ingenuity, be sure to subscribe and follow along as we keep exploring the forgotten technologies that shaped history and may still help shape our future. Thanks for watching.